Thanks so much. Thanks so much, and thanks so much for having me. Thank you to Mass Peace Action, MIT, for hosting this. I was here in my capacity with Women's Action for New Directions 3 or 4 years ago, and so it's nice to be back in a new capacity. And I want to say hello to Sarah Sheldon, who I see, one of the founders of WAND, and Young Choi, and a few other people that I see in the audience. It's really great to be with you again, even virtually. As my introduction noted, I am the advocacy director at Win Without War, and for those of you who don't know us, we are a national NGO based in DC, seeking to upend the foreign policy status quo and use non-military tools to confront our 21st century challenges. I want to start by talking about my own history in this work, because I think it's a small window into the growth of the nuclear weapons budget. I got to WAND in 2013, and I cut my teeth there. And I've been involved in a number of campaigns, like lobbying and activist campaigns, to kill various aspects of the nuclear weapons program. And spoiler alert, we didn't win any of them. So when I got to WAND, we were working to kill the upgrade for the B21 bomb. We called it a gold-plated bomb because it was going to cost more than its weight in gold. Once it was clear that we didn't have the votes to kill it, the following year, we moved on to the new nuclear armed cruise missile, a cruise missile that launches from an airplane. And we thought our rationale was rock solid. It was destabilizing, dangerous, and redundant. It was, and particularly the redundancy with an entirely new stealthy bomber being built. I believe it's called the B21 Raider, built ostensibly so that it could evade enemy air defenses. We certainly didn't need a new cruise missile. Certainly not when we were going to be upgrading the B61, which is a gravity bomb that drops from the new, yet to be built, but the new stealthy bomber. Well, unfortunately, that fight was taking place during a, yes, Democratic, the Obama administration, but Congress was in Republican hands. We lost that fight. Then most recently, since I've been at WAND, we were working to kill the Trump era low-yield nuclear weapon that was set to be deployed to nuclear armed submarines. Another destabilizing weapon. Didn't cost that much, but there are a lot of reasons why we don't have so-called low-yield nuclear weapons on submarines. One of them is that, according to experts, to deploy them, you have to surface the submarine, and so you're sort of giving up your location, and the purpose of nuclear armed submarines kind of is moot at that point. Also, our enemies won't distinguish between, or not enemies, sorry, but our ostensible enemies aren't distinguishing between low and high yield nuclear weapons that are being shot at them. And so we tried to kill the low yield nuke, and I will say in the House, which then was Democratic controlled, we were successful in defunding it. But unfortunately, with Trump in the White House and Republicans in the Senate, they prevailed, and now the low-yield nuclear weapon is deployed on nuclear-armed submarines. So we're in bad shape, and I don't want to sugarcoat it. I think most of you at this conference recognize that. Based on current plans, both Obama-era and Trump-era plans, we'll be spending an average of $50 billion for the next 10 years on nuclear weapons, according to the Congressional Budget Office. $50 billion a year, sorry. Why are we spending so much? We have the Obama era plans and the Trump era expansion. The United States is refurbishing and rebuilding its entire nuclear arsenal, its so-called triad of land-based, sea-based, and air-based based weapons, nuclear weapons. Defense officials and weapons makers convinced Congress that it's all needed. The redundancy is baked in and is there for our security. So we're looking at a new bomber, a new air-launched cruise missile, a new nuclear-armed submarine fleet, new missiles and bombs that go on them, a new intercontinental ballistic missile with new nuclear weapons to go in that. That was before Trump came into office. We used to talk about the $1 trillion triad, but as we've heard this morning, we're really talking about a true $2 trillion triad when all is said and done. With Trump, we got an expansion of plutonium pit production, a new plan for sea-launched cruise missiles, a new dangerous low-yield nuclear weapon that I already mentioned, retaining the massive B-83 bomb that was slated for retirement, advanced nuclear weapons R&D. Just since last year, the nuclear weapons budget increased by 19%. I mean, that's essentially unheard of in the federal budget, a jump that high. Certainly not happening on non-defense spending. In fiscal year 20, we spent $37.3 billion on the nuclear arsenal. In fiscal year 2021, we spent $44.5 billion. Without changes, we'll see that figure rise and rise and rise through the late 2020s and early 2030s when the nuclear modernization program spending is slated to peak. These budget numbers are dizzying, and the number of nuclear weapons that we have and the various programs that are needed to be killed and canceled and scaled back, I mean, are dizzying. And as an aside, I think you folks should really take a read of the Arms Control Association's 2019 report done by Kingston Reef and Alicia Sanders-Zachary, called U.S. Nuclear Excesses, Understanding Cost, Risks, and Alternatives, where they really do a deep dive into current plans, and then options for scaling those plans back, for canceling them. It's a really wonderful report, and I've had the pleasure of working with both of them in various capacities. So of course, we sort of understand the instability inherent. I tried to elucidate that in my earlier examples of, the various weapons that we tried to kill and our rock solid rationales for doing so. But it's really hard to quantify. I mean, even Obama's, the original sort of, his original so-called modernization plan for $88 billion for the whole thing would have been too much spending. And it's even more true now. We're seeing a global nuclear capabilities race. And as Subrata just said, the defense industry and their allies are using these weapons capabilities to justify more missile defense. So I wholeheartedly agree with him that that's a program to go after, but I also will, just say that the politics on missile defense, in my opinion, are even potentially even harder than the politics of nuclear weapons. So let's talk a little bit about the politics. I mean, as you've heard, the fact is there's very little political will in Congress to change course. It's not true that it's not there at all, but those of us who have been working on this, many of you know that it's a small percentage of members of Congress who want to see real change. As Bill Hartung pointed out, a lot of that is because of the nuclear weapons lobby, the corruption that's inherent between the special interests and PAC money that goes to these members of Congress. It's not illegal, but it should be. The nuclear weapons lobby is much bigger than the disarmament community, and even inside the executive branch, the political will during the Obama administration wasn't there either. Their sort of energy and efforts were focused on, towards the end, it was focused on the New START treaty. Well, unfortunately, and some of folks in that administration may quibble with me, but there was sort of a devil's deal done where we got New START in exchange for these sort of excessive modernization plans. as I mentioned, Obama's plan was $88 billion in 2010, but unchecked, with the special interests being in the driver's seat, those plans have metastasized, as Joe Cirincione, the former head of Plowshares, recently put it in an op-ed. And so what should we expect going forward? Well, just because we have a unified Democratic control of the executive and legislative branches doesn't mean that everything is going to change. We will know a little bit more when the Biden budget request is released, what we can expect. But I think there's also, it's possible that we'll see a year, 6 months to a year from now, there'll be sort of a wholesale rethink of the programs and plans, and a different budget request in the following fiscal year. And I know this. I try not to make my, I try not to be so pessimistic in my talks. But as I was thinking about writing these remarks, I was really reflecting on the work I've done in this space, and it's been challenging, but I still do it, and I still love doing it, and I'm still here. With conferences like these, with people like you, I think that change still is possible. We have constituents, that call and write and meet with their members of Congress. And we have activists and analysts and advocates still doing this work. And what that means for me is when this work, when it's possible, as I just said, that we will actually see new plans put in place by the Biden administration. Maybe not this year, but soon. And when those plans happen, they may look to the outside like, wow, that's a big change. That's a swift reversal. But to those of us who've been doing this work, it won't have been swift. It will have been the culmination of our work, of our sort of everyday pounding the pavement, making sure that our voices are heard. So, I still have hope. I think if we going forward, if we cut the Pentagon budget top line, we'll be putting pressure on these nuclear weapons programs and requiring the defense officials to prioritize. We also have to be very, very vocal in a new scenario where we have a new arms control treaty or agreement that, arms control isn't traded for nuke spending, because what we've seen is that it's very, very easy, too easy to kill arms control, the little that we have left, and not easy to kill nuclear weapons. Finally, we have to continue to just focus on doing the things that we all know how to do, which is being loud, making our voices heard, calling our members of Congress, and not giving up. And I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Erica, for your talk and for your work on this for at least since 2013. It's very appreciated. And I'll just take a quick minute to mention that if Reverend Dr. Liz Theo-Harris had been here, she would have reminded us that throughout history, it has been movements led by those most impacted by injustice and poverty, with faith communities and moral leaders like the people we're hearing from today as standard bearers involved, that have fundamentally transformed societies. So now we'll go